Hello, everybody. Today I have something new for you on the Tarot Podcast. It's the debut episode of a segment I'm calling Tarot in Real Life. In this segment, we're going to look at the way individual cards actually show up for living, breathing human beings. We're going to try and kind of bridge the gap between theory and practice because we all know that what tarot looks like in the little white book and what it looks like in real life are very different. At least they can be. Now, the reason I've been able to find out how cards show up for actual living, breathing human beings is because a lot of us draw a card of the day, or two cards of the day, also valid. This is a practice I encourage for everyone, and I'll actually do a separate episode on that. If you draw a card of the day, tarot will over time show you how it's going to turn up for you personally. And if you keep track of that over the weeks and months and years, what you get is your own personal tarot language. In the aggregate, we can see how all these personal tarot idioms kind of add up and overlap into a collective understanding of the card. There are always going to be meanings for a particular card that are unique to you, and which is just kind of like an in joke between you and your cards. And then there are other ways it'll show up that will seem familiar to other tarot readers. Now's a good time to take out your own Ace of Wands from your own tarot deck, so that as we talk about these different meanings, they will become associated in your mind with seeing this picture in your own favorite deck, whatever it is. If you happen to have a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you may have already encountered Arthur Edward Waite's definition of the Ace of Wands. Now, these definitions are available to everybody. They're in the Little White Book. They're also in the Pictorial Key to the Tarot, which was the book that Arthur Edward Waite wrote to go with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Arthur Edward Waite was, of course, the occultist, one of the founding members of the secret society, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. I'm going to read to you the Pictorial Key text, the PKT text of the Ace of Wands. Creation, invention, enterprise, the powers which result in these, principle, beginning source, birth, family, origin, and, in a sense, the virility which is behind them. The starting point of enterprises, and, according to another account, money, fortune, inheritance. So, yeah, I don't know. To me, those are very, very abstract concepts. They're just keywords. They don't have the resonance and the living breath of tarot within them. For that, we need to get examples from people who have actually drawn the Ace of Wands for themselves and seen how it turned out. So, I mean, it's one thing to say creation and invention, but what does it look like when I'm going about my day? And when I'm, you know, when I'm doing my chores and when I'm seeing my friends? I've spoken to a lot of folks about how the Ace of Wands shows up for them. And what I found is that it seems to circle around a handful of fairly consistent themes. The first one I'm going to talk about is the theme of the Ace of Wands as fire or heat. Now, this makes sense because if we get a little esoteric for a minute, occultists love to associate the four traditional elements with the four suits of the tarot. So wands are associated with elemental fire. Cups are associated with water. Swords are associated with air, and pentacles are associated with earth. Now, it's possible that in other decks you may see different ways of creating those correspondences, but it's good to know that in this original Rider-Waite-Smith deck, in the way that the Golden Dawn thought about it, wands are always fiery. Therefore, it is not surprising to me that I've had a number of examples of people writing in saying that the Ace of Wands showed up when it was hot. So here's one. I drew the Ace of Wands today, and the temperature in our island soared. You can almost see, like in the rising of the mercury inside the thermometer, it's like an Ace of Wands growing from the ground. Here's another submission. I've gotten this card several times for thunder or lightning storms. Lightning is, of course, just another form of fire. It's fire in the sky. It has that explosive energy of the Ace of Wands. Here's one that's not so pleasant. Woke up with a sore throat. My throat was on fire, but I got a lot of work done staying home sick. So this is interesting. This is something we're going to talk about more as we go through these meanings. Tarot is kind of value neutral. It doesn't really care if you're having a good day or a bad day in the way that you might think, and you'll recognize this the first time you get the Ten of Cups and you don't have a totally fantastic day. Um, but but sometimes the value of the card can be really intense for good or for bad. So if your throat's on fire, that's inflammation. That's totally Ace of Wands, even though it's not perhaps associated with the optimism and energy that you might have thought were part of the Ace of Wands. Okay, and I have one more example, which is also very interesting. This one's from my friend Alan. And he said, I pulled the Ace of Wands and the Knight of Wands, and literally 5 seconds later, my entire neighborhood lit up with emergency vehicles because our neighbor's house was on fire. So that's an example of what we call tarot good, which is an expression that we borrow from our friends in the astrology community who use the term astrology good to describe events that happen in the mundane world, which are subjectively disastrous, but which are incredibly astrologically apt. So thanks to Chris Brennan from the Astrology Podcast for that term. So his entire neighborhood lighting up with emergency vehicles, clearly a traumatic, stressful, difficult experience. And I'm so sorry to Ellen's neighbor, but tarot good, definitely Ace of Wands territory. Next theme for the Ace of Wands is significant anniversaries. And by anniversaries, I don't just mean like wedding anniversaries. They could be any once a year occurrence that you can think of, really. Anything that comes around seasonally, or something that simply kicks off it's an inception of some sort. This one is from a student of mine, and she writes, I drew the Ace of Wands on April 1st of this year. That was the day I officially started the Living Tarot course. The Living Tarot is my online course, which anyone can join. You can too. What I like about this is that it was a kind of initiation for her. She had been wanting to study tarot for a long time, and taking this course marked the beginning of that adventure. It was a significant first step. I have a couple from my own records of having received the Ace of Wands literally hundreds of times. Here's one I like a lot. It was December 7th, 2020, and I went to my friend Cindy's house because it was her birthday. And on her birthday cake, there was one candle. So, one candle being the Ace of Wands, a literal Ace of Wands on the birthday cake. I also got it on New Year's Day of January 1st, 2022. I didn't get it every New Year's Day because tarot is just not like that. But every once in a while, you'll get something that lines up really nicely. Here's another one I received. I've gotten this card multiple times for beginning the new college term as a teacher. So again, something that comes around periodically each year. And here's one more that I find quite interesting from a friend of mine. I drew it on Inauguration Day. Now, what's interesting about this is that my friend was not happy about the person who was sworn in on Inauguration Day. And again, that's an example of tarot being value neutral. Doesn't care if it was a happy day for you or a sad day for you, but the Ace of Wands is still accurate and relevant because it was somebody's ascension to power and the beginning of their term in office as the president of the free world. So much for anniversaries and significant beginnings. Okay, here's another one. The Ace of Wands as a literal stick or wand. Um, this is something important to remember. Tarot can be very visual, and sometimes you're just going about your business and you discover that you are not just the person who drew the card in the morning, you are in the tarot card. For example, I offered my pup a stick from my right hand. If you look at the Ace of Wands in the Rider-Waite-Smith, it's a stick in somebody's right hand, right? This happens all the time, that we're disappointed because we didn't see the card. And a lot of the time it's because we just didn't notice. Sometimes it's just super ordinary, like you're taking your dog for a walk and you throw them a stick. But that's tarot too. And I call that living the poem. Sometimes you're actually embodying the tarot card and you're not even aware of it. So keep an eye out for times like that, because they do make it may not be dramatic, but moments like that make your relationship to the tarot so much more meaningful. Okay, here's another one. I consecrated my first handmade ritual tool on an Ace of Wands day, a magic wand. So, yeah, an Ace of Wands can absolutely be a magic wand. And in fact, um, whatever a magic wand means to you. So I'll give you an example. Like when I do ritual in the morning, I have on my altar a wand, a cup, a sword, and a pentacle, like everybody does. But they're not actual wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. This is my wand. It's a Uniball micro fine tip onyx because I love them. I always have one. And it's a symbol of creativity for me, of being able to make things up and to write things into reality. So this is my magic wand. Might not be as fancy as yours, but I love it. Here's another story of a magic wand. This was a public post from the artist Jacqueline Lovesey. She talked about having a birch tree that was being strangled and swallowed up by a hawthorn. She took the initiative to take down this hawthorn that was troubling her birch. After she had cut down the offending part, suddenly, in the blink of an eye, she found herself with a magic hawthorn wand. So, sometimes a magic wand is something you slave for years, months, days over, and say spells and incantations over. And sometimes it's just something that happens on a day that you drew the Ace of Wands. Okay, here's another one. An arborist cut down tree limbs in our yard and cleared out dead stuff, opening up space for other trees to thrive and light to come in. That makes a lot of sense to me as well. Not only because the arborist was working with sticks, in this case, throwing them away instead of making them into a magic wand, but also because of the theme of new growth and allowing other things to take root and thrive. We have been talking about wands and magic wands. Now we're going to talk about wands. There's really no other way to say this. When this person drew the Ace of Wands reversed that day, in the context which she's talking about, the Ace of Wands reversed manifested as a flaccid member. So, what can I tell you? Here's another one that is related. I drew the Ace of Wands a couple days ago in relation to someone trying to conceive. The spread indicated the husband might be having issues. It turns out he'd had a vasectomy reversal of questionable effectiveness. Sometimes a banana is just a banana, sometimes a wand is just a wand, but the Ace of Wands can absolutely be quite phallic. And if you look closely at the Ace of Wands in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, other ways the Ace of Wands can show up in terms of the body. So, I've written down here energy overreactions. So, generally, when we think of energy, we think of vitality. We think of having the vigor to get something done, which is great. Most of the time, we're excited about that. However, sometimes an excess of energy is not necessarily a healthy or welcome thing in our bodies. So, for example, I drew the Ace of Wands and had severe allergies all morning long. Okay, so what are allergies? Allergies are an overreaction of our immune system to something that's really not a big deal. Here's another one, this time in a psychological context. I pulled the Ace of Wands when we were talking about mania and bipolar in my psychological disorders class. So, again, that is an example of how the Ace of Wands can cause inflation, how it can give us a sense of abundant purpose, which is in fact not based in reality. It can give us a sense of overreach. So, although the Ace of Wands can bring us enormous amounts of physical vitality, it can also represent an excess of reactiveness as well. Or, as Alan Greenspan might have said, a bout of irrational exuberance. Also, very Ace of Wands. Probably the most common way that people experience the Ace of Wands is as an influx of energy, literally being on fire in a good way. So here's one expression of that. I get this card when I'm on fire with getting difficult or undesirable work done. Here's another one. I got the Ace of Wands for doing a long, challenging run in the mountains for the first time in many years. So again, you can feel that sense of uh, activity and purpose that's associated with uh, um, a spurt of Ace of Wands fuel. Here's another one. I got a galvanizing and accelerating, those are great Ace of Wands keywords. I got a galvanizing and accelerating response from a senior colleague at work who will move some very recalcitrant people to do something we need them to do and potentially save us hours. Ignition, spark, flame. So that's really interesting. That brings up another sort of correspondence that's common for wands, which is that they're very speedy. They are traditionally the speediest of the suits. Wands are the fastest, then cups, then swords, then pentacles. And if you would like to know more about why and really get into the correspondences, you can check out my book, Tarot Correspondences, or my much more nerdy esoteric podcast, Fortune's Wheelhouse. There are reasons, is all I'm saying. So you can actually use that the speed of the four suits in your readings and see if this works for you. So sometimes when a person is wondering um, how quickly an event is going to take place or when it's going to happen, is it a matter of hours? Then it might be wands. If is it a matter of days? It might be cups. Matter of weeks, swords, and matter of months, pentacles. So try that out and see if that works for you. Timing is always a little tricky with tarot, but sometimes it can work. And then one last one here, an influx of energy. I received an unexpected $450 teaching stipend. So energy, that's perhaps money is not what you think of as energy, but our Jungian friends, I think, would say that money is an expression of the libido, the dynamism of the life force. It reminds me of what we saw in the Arthur Edward Waite quotation that according to another account, it could be money, fortune, or inheritance. Now, to be honest, it's quite rare for me to see the Ace of Wands as actual cold hard cash, but apparently sometimes it is, and maybe it will be for you. Before we wrap it up, I'm just going to share with you a couple of personal connections I've made with the Ace of Wands card. There are always things that your tarot deck will say to you that are idiosyncratic to that relationship between you and the cards, and that no one else and that other people will be like, "What? That's not how I see the Ace of Wands." However, I offer them to you in a spirit of collegiality and sharing, and maybe they will be maybe they will be useful and relevant to you as well. So I once asked tarot to show me what yes and no looked like. I'm not sure this is a wise thing to do with your cards, but I did it. I was basically asking this repository of everything in the universe, this timeless well of knowledge that brings us closer to the guiding spirits of the universe. I was asking it to act like a pendulum and tell me what yes and no look like. Anyway, Tarot was a good sport about it, and Tarot said that yes would be the Ace of Wands. So now, whenever I see the Ace of Wands, it's like a giant exclamation point. It's like I call it the big yes. And if I draw Ace of Wands when I'm debating whether to do something or not, I just do it. I don't even think about it. That's my relationship with the Ace of Wands. Interestingly, when I asked Tarot what no looked like, Tarot gave me the Page of Swords reversed, which really stumped me at the time. And eventually I did come to understand why that made sense. But we'll talk about that when we get to the Page of Swords episode many months from now. So, the other thing I would like to say is that for me, besides being the Ace of Wands being a uniball pen, it is also a microphone. And the reason for that is because I was, as a young person, very shy. I didn't like to use my voice, and I didn't like to be loud, and I didn't like to be heard or called upon or asked anything in public. So, becoming more comfortable with public speaking and, in fact, becoming comfortable with a microphone has been a really important way the Ace of Wands has shown up for me. So, perhaps if you're also trying to come to terms with using your own voice, the Ace of Wands might be a microphone for you as well. In general, to recap, the Ace of Wands might be heat or fire. It might be kind of fresh starts or anniversaries, inceptions. It might be a literal stick or a magic wand or a wand. It might be an influx of energy or inflammation, even. But what all these themes have in common is that there's a sense of activity around them, a sense of new growth and beginnings. I hope this exploration of the various meanings accruing to the Ace of Wands has been helpful to you in terms of your own readings, whether you read only for yourself or whether you read for other people as well. We're going to keep doing this for all the cards in the deck in order. So next up is the Two of Wands. If you have a great Two of Wands story that you would like me to share on the air, please send it in. You can reach me through the contact form at thetarotpodcast.com. Or if you're a Patreon member, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart if you are, you can share your Two of Wands stories on the Tarot Podcast Discord server. I can't wait to read them all. That is our episode for today. Until next time, keep shuffling and don't be afraid to see what's in the cards for you.